Assalamu alaikum. I am Maria Salim, doing my bachelor's in computer science from UIT University. My upcoming 4 videos will be on numerical computing, the course I'm studying right now in my 3rd semester. And today we will be discussing about Gauss-Jacobi method. It's quite an easy method. Basically, it's an iterative method in which we have to find out the values of our variables. So here I have taken these 3 equations. What happens in this equation is that the first value in our first equation must be equal or greater to the sum of other values present in the same equation. Then in the second equation, the second value here, like second value is 27. So it must be greater or equal to the sum of other values, present in that same equation. Here 27 is greater than the sum of 37 and 1, that is 4. So when we sum 3 and 1, that is 4. So 27 is greater. Then in our third equation, the last value must be equal or greater to the sum of other values present in the equation. So here our 17, this 17 is greater to the sum of 3 and 2. So we wrote these coefficients in a matrix, in a 3 by 3 matrix, and these right hand side vectors in another matrix. Now what we have to do is we have to find out the value of x1. We will take our first equation, that is 26x1, and through that we will find out our x1. What we have to do is, in place of x2 and in place of x3, we have to write down 0. That is our initial guess. So we will write down 0 in place of x2 and x3. And then we will get our x1 as 0.48. To find out our second value, So to find out our second value, we will take our second equation, and through that second equation, we can find out x2. We have to find out x2. So to find out x2, we will write down our x1 and x3 as zeros, because 0 is our initial guess. In the first iteration, we will write down our initial guesses as 0. I write down 0 here, and then I got x2 as minus 0.52. To find out x3, we will take our third equation, and then in place of x1 and x3, we will write down the initial guess, that is 0. We will only take initial guess for our first iteration, and through that we will get x3 as 0.35. We got the values of x1, x2, and x3 in the first iteration. So for the first iteration, x1 is 0.48, x2 is minus 0.52, and x3 is 0.35. Now we will find out the second iterative value of x1, x2, and x3. This time, to find out x1, we will write down our x2 and x3 as their previous values. The previous x2 now is minus 0.52, and previous x3 is 0.35. Now we will get our x1 as 0.49. To find out second iterative value of x2, we will place the previous values of x1 and x3. So Here, previous x1 is 0.48 and previous x3 is 0.35. So now our second iterative value of x2 is minus 0.59. To find out the second iterative value of x3, we will put our x1's previous value, that is 0.48, and x2's previous value, that is minus 0.52. And here we will get our x3 as 0.38. Now we will find out the third iterative values of x1, x2, and x3. But before that, we will place these values in our table. We got x1 as 0.49 and x2 as minus 0.59 and x3 as 0.38. Now finding the third iterative values. Here in place of x2 and x3, to find out x1, here in place of x2 and x3, we will write down their previous values. The previous value of x2 now is minus 0.59 and the previous value of x3 is 0.38. We will get our x1 as 0.50. To find out x2, we will write down x1's previous value, that is 0.49, and x3 as 0.38. We will get our x2 as minus 0.59. Now finding x3, here in place of x1, we will write down its previous value, that is 0.49, and in place of x2, we will write down that was minus 0.59, and now our x3 will be 0.39. We will put these values in our table now. The third iterative x1 was 0.50. X2 is minus 0.59 and x3 is 0.39. Now we will look at the coding section, that how can we code this Gauss-Jacobi method. So here I have named my class as Gauss-Jacobi. Then in the main method, our Java program will be run. I have made a 2D array and named it as coefficients. In this 2D array, we have a matrix of 3 by 3. I have taken the same values as we did in our question. Now I have made a 1D array and named it as constant. And in this array, I have stored the right-hand side constants of our equation. And also to remember that each row is representing one equation. Then there is another array named initial guess. And in this array, we have stored the initial values of our variables. The variables are x1, x2, x3. Then in the iteration variable, I have stored 3. I have set my iteration variable as 3. I have passed Gauss-Jacobi method. The arguments are coefficients, constants, initial guess, iterations. All these arguments are defined above. Then in our private method, the n is the size of our 2D array. The new array current solution has the values of initial guess. Also, the clone method is used, which is used to copy. Then, in a new array named next solution, we are storing the values for our next iteration. Then, the for loop is run, and it will run till 3 times because here iterations mean 3. Then the nested for loop will run over each equation. Then the other nested group will run over the each variable present in our equation. Then comes the main part. Here we will calculate the next value of our variable by dividing the updated sum with the coefficient, and then we will update our current solution with the values calculated for the next iteration. If we run our program, we will get the answers as, here I got my answer for iteration 1, answer for iteration 2, and lastly the answers for iteration 3.